The overview of what we will be discussing with Bobby Shoebridge during his interview. Bobby was a member of the 2nd 3rd Motor Ambulance Convoy, and as that implies, it was an ambulance unit. It was deployed into Singapore in 1941, and his unit was one of two service corps units which were placed under command of the British troops but under administrative command of the Australians. When the Japanese invaded in the southern Thailand and northern Malaya area on the 8th of December 1941, Bobby's unit and Indian and British units were deployed in this area to prevent this invasion. It was in an operation called Operation Matador, which ultimately was not successful, and that may be putting it mildly. The unit, the force then and others were forced to fall back through Malaya over a period of 70 days, and finally on the 15th of February 1942 surrender took place in Singapore. Now, Bobby's unit was in Singapore, and he was in Singapore until August 1942, when he became part of a force of 200 combined British and Australian troops who were put onto a vessel called the Fukai Maru, and they had no idea where they were going, but they were then shipped to Taiwan. It was then known as Formosa. What is interesting, worth noting, is that the vessel they were on was carrying a load of bauxite, and they were accommodated in racks around this bauxite. When they arrived in Taiwan, or Formosa at that stage, the bauxite was unloaded, and a load of rice was substituted, which subsequently they understood was destined to go through to Japan in this area. After a couple of weeks in Formosa, during which they had the unloading of the bauxite and the loading of the rice, they then moved on to southern Korea, or as it was known then as Chosin, and they were disembarked from the vessel at this port called Busan. The Japanese made a demonstration of them by marching them around the city to demonstrate to the Koreans just what control they had over the imperialists, and then they were moved north up to what is now known as Seoul, but at that time they were then accommodated in two camps in that area known as Keijo and Jinsen. From this location, they were there for a month or two, and then in November 1942, they were placed on a train. Well, I shouldn't say 100 of them, which was 16 Australians, 3 New Zealanders and 81 Brits, were placed on a train to go somewhere. They had no idea where they were going, but when the train came in, they discovered that there were 1,300 other white faces on the train, and they ultimately proved to be 1,300 Americans. They were then moved through from Korea, or Chosin, through to what we now know as Manchuria, but was then known as Manchukuo, and they were accommodated at a place called Mukden, or they disembarked at a place called Mukden, and they were in a sort of a suburb of Mukden called Hotan. This is an interesting map. It is a 1944 map produced by the Australian Red Cross, and it shows that they had some understanding of where many of the POW camps were. But just to summarise, the There is Malaya, there's Singapore. The Fukai Maru sailed from there to Formosa, or as we know, there's Taiwan now. Then it went through to Chosin, known now as Korea, and then they moved north to Seoul, then known as Keijo and Jinsen, and ultimately they moved through into Manchukuo, as you can see the name there, now known as Manchuria, and they were in Mukden, in particular a camp called Hotem. Just to finally summarise, of the 16 Australians that went up there, there was only one officer, that was the doctor, and of the 16 Australians that went up there, 5 were from Western Australia. Now we'll stop and we will hear Bobby's account of these events in his own words.